Hi, my name is Aruecho. I'm gonna talk about Extinction today. Extinction was a cool idea executed badly. This is my opinion as an educated game designer as to how it failed. Now, a lot of what I'm going to talk about relates to the bad pacing of the DLC and the dependency of other DLCs and maps to even be able to compete at all. To start off with, the launch was horrific. It was an unbalanced mess with very little foresight. This launch pretty much infested into every single cluster there is to completely ravage the servers. From mech to titans, completely ruining any kind of salvation in the future on these servers. What I mean by this is that the unbalance was so strong that the tribes that took advantage of it for the first few days gained so much, there is almost nothing you could do to stop them anymore. So, just to point out, the tribe we had on our small tribe server farmed between 2,500 to maybe 5,000 elements within the first few days, which is hard to compete with. Secondly, another huge problem I see with this DLC is that you could easily farm elements, which is good, but there's no real way to craft anything with it for a pretty long while, which is bad. The ease of access of elements and having it more widespread is a good change, but the acquisition of tech realms is not matching this pacing at all. You can literally have 1000 plus element and nothing to use it for just by doing the low level stuff, and this is bad because you sit with resources you won't need for a long while. Now, important to note, I don't think every single tech realm should be unlockable here on this map, but every important ones definitely do, especially those that actually impacts the map feel and play itself. This includes the replicator, turret, generator, buildings, weapons and armors. And it needs to be very easy to unlock. Example might be replicator from blue drop, generator and turret from yellow drop, and the rest from red and purple drops. This is in addition to the changes they made to the titans dropping a few tech realms, which is good, but a bit too late. So, thirdly, with the recent changes to the caves, that being no longer able to fly in them, there is two major flaws. First off, it makes crafting the replicator, which is needed for almost everything this DLC has to offer, just look at the engrams, more difficult, and secondly, it creates a larger gap between taming titans and having any sort of defense against the titan. And the reason why I'm saying that is because it's way easier to go in and summon the titan than it is to go in and craft the replicator. Now, this segues into a huge problem with the pacing of this map, and this is the titans. They are a lot more powerful and have very few actual counters. One of these counters is tech turrets. Now, this is in theory good if you look at the focus of the DLC, which is tech. But then we come back to my second complaint: how are you supposed to get tech realms on a fresh cluster? Now, that's a trick question because you obviously will encounter a titan way before you will unlock the tech realms. And sadly, this creates this really uninteresting rush for the first one to take the titan to completely control the server, and ultimately turning it into a PvE server in terms of what you do on it. This sadly is the kind of thing that makes it very uninteresting to play on Extinction servers, because all you need to do is rush Titan, rush for stuff you need to do bosses on other maps, and then you just get insane amount of element to build a crazy base. And then you just wait a few months, 2 months I believe, before the cluster opens and you have competition again. Now, I know many people will scoff at this and say, well, that's the fun part, being the top dog, but honestly, the way of becoming the top dog is incredibly uninteresting, even more so than it has ever been in Ark. Now, a way they could solve this neatly and push back the pacing quite a bit is to make the titans more endgame rather than mid-game, and require that you kill them before you could even tame them. This could be done with having it drop a cell which you need in your inventory, or in some way need to interact with the titan after you complete the taming process, which will make it way harder to actually tame titans. Okay, so that wraps it up with the stuff that was intentionally chosen by the developers without foresight and intended design. Now, I was going to talk about corrupted dinos in a pretty big segment. It was actually a pretty big part of the video, but Chris W touched on this on Reddit a few days ago, indicating that they are intending on changing some stuff with them to minimize their impact on the game, which is good. I think I kind of want to just give a small feedback on his chain of thought, which was to leash them harder or to have them despawn. It might be better and more elegant if you start thinking about the light pets solution to Reapers as a solution, and what I mean by that is I think it would be good in terms of the game and, you know, the whole immersion thing to not have them despawn or even just return to their spawn point, which kind of makes it very, you know, artificial. And how I mean this should work is that when they're outside of their spawn zone, and by that I mean the dead man's land, they take more damage, kind of like how light pets affects the Reapers, right? So this would make them still a threat, but they would take way more damage, which means they would be a lot less dangerous and turrets would actually be able to kill them off. Because I kind of think that the whole threat is a good thing in terms of the game, but it kind of at the moment is too overpowered to be able to deal with, which is bad. But the whole concept of the world being dangerous is something I really love and I kind of miss in Ark. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is something that Wildcard always does, which is confusing, and I don't really understand the concept behind it. With every map they made, it's always really low levels. Like, wild dinos are always somewhere between 5 and 25 at almost half maybe of the spawns. And this has several effects. First off, the corrupted dinos is way less challenging than they seem to be intended to be, right? Like, there seem to be this huge threat, but their levels kind of diminish that fact, not help it. On top of that, it makes it arbitrarily harder to get a good breed line or good tames, and in general the whole world is not as dangerous as it should be. As always with Extinction, the early game is annoying and hard because the dinos do impact, even though they're low level, they have a huge impact, such as the enforcers, the raptors, especially raptors. But as soon as you get to early mid game, it kind of dies off and they become this annoyance rather than danger. Now, this curve is kind of confusing to me because the enemies of the game becomes trivial way earlier than they need to be, and it superficially makes it harder to get good tames, and it makes it more annoying. And on top of that, not more interesting, just more annoying, which is bad, right? You don't want annoying, you want interesting or hard or time consuming, which is fine, but this is not any of that, right? Now, especially with this map, this would be a lot more fun if it was challenging, if it was easier to get tames, but we will probably see the same kind of pattern we've seen before, with the older maps being overshadowed by other mod maps. This happened with Ragnaros and Scorched Earth, this happened with Center and the Island, although Island is obviously still popular because it's a base game, but if you look at the Ragnarok, it is way more popular than anything that they made. And I think this kind of ties back to having every single dino in the game, of course, but on top of that, it's the levels, it's the difficulty, it's the pain of doing the whole thing, not this tiny, small level stuff that doesn't really scare you. Now, this is the end of the video. If you enjoyed, don't hesitate liking the video. If you didn't, then dislike. If you want more, then you could subscribe. I may have some ideas of what to bring up, and I will most likely do a small let's play of the small tribes I did with Kishko at some point as well. We have a few interesting events that happened and a few interesting raids. We had a few interesting fights, and in general just exploring the whole DLC and the map as a whole.